Hello, thanks for joining me for today's CMA Learning webinar. My name is Rachael Crowe. I'm Head of Insights at Manchester-based B2B content agency Hattrick. Just as a small talking point, really, as way of an introduction, you'll notice the umlaut over the A. That it should really actually be pronounced Hattrick, and that's a nod to the agency's Nordic roots, as actually our agency founder is Swedish. And we affectionately refer to this Nordic and Northern mashup of cultural influences as Sweden Chester. And it's for us, it really represents the forward-thinking Scandinavian approach, but at the same time as capturing all the grit, determination and resilience, if you like, of the industrial North. And, oh my goodness, we've never needed resilience more than ever as we do now. It's certainly unprecedented times that we're all working through. But, I sort of take heart in the fact that for all the upheaval and the fear and confusion, there's also creating a stronger sense of community. And even though we can't physically come together as a community, technology is thankfully keeping us all connected. And, it's through initiatives like this that the CMA has so thoughtfully made happen in the last few days, is that this is how we can start leveraging, I guess, as best we can, the opportunities to keep going, keep learning, to keep making new associates and really exposing ourselves to different ways of thinking that might make us look at things, in a new light moving forwards, really on every level. And so that really brings me to the topic I'd like to address in today's webinar: planning for a digital by default future, how to find focus fast. And I guess how I want to frame the session today is in the same way as this unwelcome, but what we recognise is wholly necessary sort of downtime, in the same way as it offers a time for personal reflection and encourages everyone to take a less self-centred, more empathetic stance. I think the point I'd like to get across is that businesses too have the opportunity to take stock a little and to be more human. And so really, when I talk about planning for a digital by default future, what I don't mean is sort of the bigger picture scenario planning that is kind of too overwhelming for us all to sort of comprehend at this moment in time. What I mean is planning in a strategic sense, and it's taking this time out now to make sure that as a business you have a really strong positioning and a solid set of messaging to make a successful resurgence. And I mean when the time is right. And it's not only about sort of the messaging, but then also translating that through into a wider suite of content that works to deliver a multi-channel experience in what we refer to as digital first mode. So it's making sure that you've got a digital pieces of engagement and communication throughout the customer journey touch points. And really what I want to get across is isn't about long drawn out processes entailing months and months of planning work and the output being a lot of untouched personas that sit in a drawer in the business somewhere. This is really about giving you a flavour of a pragmatic sort of fast track solution for achieving standout. Simply, she says, by getting the right message to the right person at the right time, which is what I'm trying to encapsulate in this slide. And that sounds really easy, right? I mean, after all, digital marketing in theory makes it easier than ever for us to give prospects what they care about, because we have more data at our disposal than ever before, and data is there to guide us. But really, what I want to sort of addresses that the potential pitfall or challenge of taking a digital first stance is that you forget the human side, you get lost in the process, and everything becomes too intellectualized. I think what happens is, or what is happening, is people are forgetting that this is about people. And while data may capture what's happening, I mean, that's what data is essentially. It's capturing the patterns, the human behaviours that are occurring, but it isn't telling you why those patterns of behaviour are occurring. And the missing piece is context, because while 3 out of 4 of us are seeking feedback from sales and web analytics, and then obviously there's a heavy reliance on keyword research to really get an understanding of what the key drivers and motivations are behind what information people are trying to seek out when they start out on a search. But less than half of us are actually talking to our customers. So what this shows us is a real over-reliance on data that's being generated by search engines and social algorithms. what I want to say is that this machine learning, while it's important, it needs to be balanced by the softer skills that help shape meaningful outreach. So yes, you do need the structured data, and by that I mean the hard facts, the figures, the algorithms, but we need to make sure that it's being offset by what we call unstructured data. And that's really what we mean of by observation, intuition, and inquisition. And really, it's about the ability to ask the right questions, and that, that age-old skill of actually listening to people. Because without that all-important context, it's really hard to hone in on that sweet spot here between what you're trying to sell and what your customer is actually interested in. In other words, why the buyer should care. And it's only by really getting to the crux and understanding their most pressing problems that you can hope to arrive at that sweet spot. And this really really requires quite a subtle shift of mindset, for example. So to start by doing that, you need to stop thinking, who is our target audience, and start thinking about who it is that you're trying to help. Similarly, instead of thinking in terms of leads, it's really important to switch it around and think about subscribers. And by doing so, what you're doing is recognizing that your prospects and customers can actually opt out of the information you're sharing with them at any time. And a really important part of your job is to keep them coming back for more. And you can only really do that if you understand what they're coming back for. And ultimately, successful and ongoing engagement entails taking what we call a customer-centric position. What we mean by that is just the ability to put yourself in your customer's shoes. And when I say it's just the ability to do that, that really isn't an intuitive thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do, because if it wasn't, over half of brands, as e-consultancy sort of highlighted with this piece of research last year, over half of brands are still struggling, to get the grasp of this concept. And one of the reasons why it is so hard to sort of think or put ourselves in our customers' shoes is because we're all suffering from what we call a classic case of the curse of knowledge. Now, I'm sure probably many of you might have come across this. It's actually a scientific phenomenon that was first applied to the study of economics by Stanford University. And what it's really trying to do is capture the fact that once you know something, it's really, really hard to unknow it. You sort of revert back to that mental state, which means you have cognitive bias. You assume others have that same level of knowledge. So we'll see, it's rife in B2B, highly technical B2B categories in particular. I mean, content marketing industry, I think we're all guilty of this. And I'm sure as if I was to go back through this presentation with a critical eye, I'd see lots of examples of this. It's because we're all part of a community, and to feel part of that community, we sort of rely on the use of buzzwords and acronyms that really show we're in the know, but at the same time as showing we're in the know, they actually alienate our customer base and make it difficult for people who outside of the arena to really understand what it is that you're talking about. And if you don't understand what's being talked about, how can you align a problem that you've got with a solution that's being talked about? It's a very difficult thing to do. So it's a very sort of prevalent issue in many categories that we're dealing with. The other reason it's so hard to take a customer-centric position is because we're all still really guilty of working in silos. I think probably this new way of working that we've all had to get to grips with over the last few weeks probably highlighted just how much we're still guilty of working in silos. So, for example, when it comes to starting out on doing the sales and positioning and messaging piece, what we find is that, although those at the coalface of customer communications in sales or heading up customer experience may know very well what their main buyer obstacles are, because let's face it, they're the ones trying to circumnavigate them day in, day out. Very often marketing teams will come to us feeling like they've got to start this whole process from scratch, when really those insights are embedded in the business somewhere. It's a case of bringing multifunctional teams together to really have some healthy debate around how the offering is made up and what the rational and emotional benefits are from a customer's perspective. So this is a workshopping tool we use to bring stakeholders together, as I've just talked about, to try and get that cross-team buy-in. And it's really, really important part of the process, because you need to bring people together in the first place for speed. We talk about finding focus fast. Well, in order to get, through this process and get the outputs at the back end of it that you need to bring people with you. And that's the other really important point as well, is by bringing people with you, you're going to stand more chance of the outputs having a long and useful shelf life. Because what you want to keep front of mind is this isn't just a one-off exercise. It's not just about producing a marketing campaign on the back of it. It should really, this piece should bring everything together and be the backbone of a creation of a whole suite of pre and post sales sort of enablement collateral. And what we do this is called our future positioning map. And when we say future positioning map, the objective is to look into the near future, say just 2 or 3 years ahead of where you are now. And that's because marketing has to be ahead of where the business is at. So you have to take an aspirational stance, but take it too far and it starts to lose all credibility. So that's why it's really important that you're not going too far ahead. It's in order to get to the essence of what makes your organisation unique and how you deliver value for customers in the here, now and near future. You need to really sort of start working from the bottom left clockwise round, thinking about how the offer breaks down. So that's the easiest place to start, because that's sort of just thinking about what we're all very used to, and that's our products and services. But then as you move around the outside of the tool, you're getting more and more into the customer shoes, and that's when it becomes quite tricky. You tend to, as a business, have some quite healthy debate around what you want what the customer perceives the benefits to be, and really importantly getting to the crux of how they feel when they're using your product, service or expertise. And post-workshop, this positioning tool then is also used as a baseline to build out and validate a messaging framework. And we sort of typically would come up with, say, 3 or 4 pillars that underpin that promise that we arrive at. But here in this slide, what I really want to emphasize is that there's another important piece to this process, and that's what we call discovery. And what I mean by that is sort of an exploration of the landscape that you're operating in, and that could encompass everything, if you like, from competitor audits, doing a review of the channels that you're present or perhaps not present in and want to look at making yourselves known in, market trends overall. It might involve carrying out some customer interviews, and really it's everything that feeds into us getting a better understanding of how an organisation can differentiate themselves. And often we'll bookend the planning process with some degree of this discovery work. So we'll do some at the outset, and that's really to inform the direction of travel in the first place. So it'll take us to some interesting territories to explore, and then we will carry out the positioning work, build out the messaging at least as far as we can, and then we'll go back to the discovery piece and just have a look at which of those territories offer the richest scope, and then most importantly align best with the core positioning and supporting messaging. To help bring this to life, I just wanted actually to touch on some discovery work that we undertook with a fire safety engineering company. And the reason that I sort of picked out this piece of work, because it's a great example of how discovery can take you to a really unexpected place. Also, it just feels very timely and relevant, as in this instance, we were dealing with the repercussions of the Grenfell tragedy, and also the results of the Hattrick review were just about to be published. So just as businesses in the next weeks and months ahead are going to be really reeling to understand how to appropriately go to market with a set of messaging that's going to resonate, when an event entailing so much human tragedy erupts. At this time, we had to sort of take the repercussions of Grenfell and then work with them to shape an approach that not only was empathetic to that, but aligned with the organisation's digital first ambitions. So just to give you then a bit of context, the brief was to help shape an approach that aligned with those ambitions. They were a skilled team of fire safety engineering consultants, and they developed an app to monitor fire safety compliance. So that's basically, say, a facilities manager in an office block or a hotel complex having to walk the corridors and make sure, using a paper and a checkboard to check off that the extinguishers are in place and in date, that the fire doors are all compliant. Because believe it or not, that was the sort of ironic and crazy thing, is a lot of this work is still being done on paper. And they developed an app which allowed them to automate and to make sure everything was done digitally. So, there's no danger of everything getting lost in a fire should that occur. But they, along with the rest of the world, of course, wanted to be seen as digitally disruptive. And for us, when we started looking at this in the first place, it just seemed like a tall order. How were we going to sort of make fire engineering exciting and also a really relevant strand to the whole digital transformation conversation? And so we approached this really by starting to explore the predictable spaces that allowed us to get a good grasp of their world. So you'll see that's the spaces we explored top left. And we wanted to see, we soon started to see, that everyone was taking the same scaremongering tack, and the client was, when they first started talking to us, was really focused on doing the same. They felt like the only way to get the message across and to get people to sit up and take notice of the new technology was to make the responsible person realise just how responsible or accountable they would be in the event of an incident, that ultimately they'd end up in jail. But really, intuitively we felt uncomfortable, I guess, with how contrived this felt, but also it was a very obvious and overcrowded route, which we felt confine them to the sort of predictable spaces they wanted to get out of, that fire safety facilities management world, when they wanted to be sort of taking the conversation higher up the food chain, if you like, to the CEO and COOs of multinational corporations and hospitality complexes. So we started to think about other sectors that had come under sort of heavy criticism for taking a lax approach to compliance. So that led us to explore the financial services sector for inspiration. And how we got there really was thinking about what had occurred post the 2008 crash. And what we saw was that a whole new category had emerged in that space and continues to emerge, referred to as RegTech. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with that. So it's just as it says on the tin, really, regulatory technology. And that really is the use of technology to simplify and digitize compliance. And that was taking place in the financial services sector. And for us, that was the light bulb moment to say that, what actually the fire engineers had come up with wasn't just that they developed a fire safety app. What they were doing was introducing RegTech to the built environment. And doing a lot of reading around this and starting to see it was being talked about in sectors outside of finance. There was no real reference to it within the built environment. And ultimately, because they were fire safety engineers that had developed this app, they had, not only did they have the technology, they had the real credibility to confidently lay claim to this RegTech position, because they have the regulatory expertise that is also a key element in delivering on RegTech. And when we presented this to them, they were really, really excited, because ultimately what it gave them was a more empowering approach that allowed them to cut through in a sort of into more disruptive spaces and to be seen as digital first and disruptive, but to do so in a way that was sort of championing and not lambasting the prospect pool that they needed to engage. And so just to conclude really today, I've talked a lot about the opportunity businesses have to take stock a little and to sort of reassess, if you like, the best laid content marketing plans that I'm sure for most people have sort of gone out the window, or at least need to be revisited as recent events have unfolded. And really, it's about making sure that you're taking an empathetic customer first and human approach that allows you to stand out. But really what I wanted to make the point here is that it doesn't need to be about starting over. You don't need to just engage a sort of strategic planning process when you're starting out and trying to decide on what is the right brand positioning and supporting set of messaging. You may have already a perfectly solid set of brand building blocks in place, and what it might be about at this time, it might be about inviting fresh perspective in to sort of set out in a new direction. It might be to support a new product launch, to fuel a planned thought leadership initiative, maybe to deal with impending legislation. Whatever event it is that might be forcing you to reevaluate your old way of doing things, there's a pragmatic way to bring that fresh thinking in. Because I suppose what I'm trying to say is that although sometimes in-depth is necessary, I'm not saying that, criticizing traditional planning processes. Sometimes you do need to go through those in-depth processes, but oftentimes you just need someone who can see what others can't, and that's because perhaps you're just too close to it. Perhaps like many of us, like we touched on before, just suffering from that, the curse of knowledge. And really what we wanted to set out today is a fast track approach that does encompass sort of all the traditional planning elements you'd expect, but also is very focused on eliminating waste, so that it gives you a positioning that stacks up, but also gives you a set of plug and play messaging that you can literally just take to market, and that really helps focus your marketing efforts. And really, the way we're structured helps us as an agency to get there faster. I'm here today representing Lab. Lab is our dedicated research and insights arm, and I think we believe for an agency of our size and scope, having what the old ad agency world refers to as the strategic planning function is a real point of differentiation. What happens is we bring all the insights that Lab gathers and feed them into our content engine, or Fabrique. You'll notice our Nordic nod here with Lab, which is lab, and Fabrique, which is factory in Swedish. And what we do is we feed all those insights into the content engine, and that, in theory, that makes the transition from planning into production seamless. And it also means that our Fabric content engine can really ensure every piece of content serves a purpose, because we've gone through and aligned the messaging and offering to the customer journey. Tomorrow, our head of content and outreach, and also the face of Fabrique, Mr. Paul Milescoff, is going to be building on what I've talked about here today. And he's a real seasoned pro on doing this kind of thing. So I urge you to take the time out of your schedule to listen to him as he sort of tackles how to get your content engine into gear. He's here at 4 p.m. tomorrow, and he'll be relaying sort of 4 core strategies for shifting into digital first delivery mode. And of course, please do get in touch if you'd like to know any more about anything that I've whizzed through today. Thank you so much. Stay safe and enjoy the sunshine.